From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
You never know who you're killing because you never actually see a face. You just have silhouettes. They don't have to take the shot. They don't have to bear that burden. I'm the one that has to bear that burden.
Has the U.S. drone program fueled the feelings of hatred that ignited terrorism and groups like ISIS? That's the conclusion of 4 former drone operators who are speaking out. They've issued a letter to President Obama warning the U.S. drone program is one of the most devastating driving forces for terrorism. They accuse the administration of lying about the effectiveness of the drone program, saying it's good at killing people, just not the right ones.
How do you feel if, like, you can't use "I obeyed orders" as an excuse? It's I obey the Constitution, regardless of lawful or unlawful orders, and lawful orders follow the Constitution, and that's the hardest part.
The 4 U.S. drone operators are featured in a new film called Drone. They risk prosecution by an administration that's been unprecedented in its targeting of government whistleblowers. Today, in a Democracy Now! Exclusive, they join us in their first extended broadcast interview. But first, a hostage crisis is underway in Mali, where suspected Islamist militants have stormed a luxury hotel in the capital, Bamako. The gunmen opened fire while taking over 180 people hostage. At least 3 deaths have been confirmed so far. Special forces have moved in. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Bamako, Mali, special forces have stormed the American-owned Radisson Blu Hotel after gunmen seized control of the hotel early this morning. The hotel has at least 140 guests and 30 staff. At least 3 people have been reportedly killed. State television reports 80 hostages may have been freed. We'll have more on the developing situation after headlines. The French Senate is expected to approve President François Hollande's plan to extend the state of emergency by 3 months and to grant Hollande a sweeping expansion of state powers. The measures include easing police raids without a warrant and allowing the government to strip citizenship from dual passport holders convicted of terrorism. French authorities say they carried out more than 414 raids on Wednesday, arrested 64 people, and placed another 118 under house arrest. In news from Israel and the occupied territories, 5 people were killed on Thursday in 2 separate attacks Israeli police say were carried out by Palestinians. In Tel Aviv, authorities say a Palestinian man fatally stabbed 2 Israeli men. Hours later, a Palestinian man allegedly opened fire outside a Jewish-only Israeli settlement in the occupied West Bank, killing 3 people, including an 18-year-old American student, Ezra Schwartz, of Massachusetts. Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard has been released from a North Carolina prison after 30 years behind bars. Pollard's a former U.S. Navy intelligence officer sentenced to life in prison for passing U.S. secrets to Israel. In 1999, Seymour Hersh of The New Yorker reported Israel was suspected of sharing some of Pollard's material with the Soviet Union in exchange for continued Soviet permission for Jewish emigration to Israel. He's been granted Israeli citizenship while in prison and says he now hopes to move to Israel. The terms of his parole require him to stay in the United States for 5 years. In Washington, the House approved legislation Thursday to impose significant restrictions on Iraqi and Syrian refugees seeking to resettle in the United States. The American Security Against Foreign Enemies Act passed the House with nearly unanimous Republican support and the backing of 47 Democrats. The legislation would require the Secretary of Homeland Security, the FBI Director, and the Director of National Intelligence to personally approve every Syrian or Iraqi refugee's application, in addition to the current 18-month screening process. After the vote, CNN Global Affairs correspondent Elise Labott promptly suspended by the network for 2 weeks after she tweeted, quote, "House passes bill that could limit Syrian refugees. Statue of Liberty bows head in anguish." Meanwhile, Republican frontrunners Donald Trump and Ben Carson are both under fire for comments they've made about refugees and Muslims in the wake of the Paris attacks. On Thursday, Dr. Ben Carson used an analogy to quote rabid dogs in defending his opposition to the resettlement of Syrian refugees. Carson's campaign also issued a map of the United States depicting the states where more than 24 governors have said they oppose resettlement, but the map erroneously placed 5 New England states in the wrong location. Meanwhile, Donald Trump took calls for a religious test on incoming refugees one step further when an NBC reporter asked whether Trump would implement a database to track all American Muslims.
There should be a lot of systems beyond database. I mean, we should have a lot of systems. And today you can do it. But right now we have to have a border, we have to have strength, we have to have a wall, and we cannot let what's happening to this country happen.
But that's something your White House would like to implement.
Oh, I would certainly implement that. Absolutely.
Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has outlined her foreign policy proposals, which call for intensifying and accelerating President Obama's strategy against the Islamic State. Speaking to the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, Clinton called for sending more U.S. special forces to Syria and for imposing a no-fly zone over Syria.
Effective coalition air campaign is necessary, but not sufficient. And we should be honest about the fact that to be successful, airstrikes will have to be combined with ground forces actually taking back more territory from ISIS. Like President Obama, I do not believe that we should again have 100,000 American troops in combat in the Middle East. That is just not the smart move to make here. If we've learned anything from 15 years of war in Iraq and Afghanistan, it's that local people and nations have to secure their own communities. We can help them, and we should, but we cannot substitute for them.
Hillary Clinton also proposed a, quote, intelligence surge and called on technology companies to work with the government on issues of encryption. A growing number of officials have called on companies to offer government agencies a backdoor into their encrypted tools in the wake of the Paris attacks, even though officials have not presented any evidence that the Paris attackers even used encryption. To see our recent interview with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Glenn Greenwald on encryption, mass surveillance, and the aftermath of Paris, go to democracynow.org. In Britain, prison authorities are investigating the death of a 21-year-old transgender woman who was found dead in the all-male Leeds prison in West Yorkshire last Friday. Vicky Thompson had identified as female since her mid-teens. She and her lawyer had repeatedly asked for her to be relocated to a women's prison. The FDA has for the first time approved a genetically modified animal as fit for human consumption and for sale across the United States. The genetically engineered salmon, known as the AquaVantage salmon, has been genetically modified to grow to market size twice as fast as a real salmon. The approval comes despite fierce opposition from consumer and environmental activists. Today marks the first anniversary of the death of Akai Gurley, the 28-year-old African-American man who was shot to death by New York police officer Peter Lang in the dimly lit stairwell of a Brooklyn housing project. Officer Peter Lang has pleaded not guilty to second-degree manslaughter and other charges. Meanwhile, in Michigan, white police officer William Melendez has been found guilty of assault and misconduct after pummeling and tasing 58-year-old unarmed African-American Floyd Dent in January. Officer Melendez is nicknamed RoboCop, as has been sued repeatedly for excessive force. In New Jersey, Princeton students have ended a 32-hour sit-in at the university president's office after administrators signed a commitment to begin conversations about addressing campus racism. The sit-in began Wednesday amidst massive national student protests. Princeton students are demanding the removal of Woodrow Wilson's name. As president, he ordered the resegregation of restrooms and cafeterias in Washington government buildings. In some federal offices, he ordered screens to be set up to separate black and white workers. His racist views were so widely known at the time that W.E.B. Du Bois wrote an open letter to Woodrow Wilson in which he called Wilson's policies, quote, the gravest attack on the liberties of African Americans since emancipation. And in New York City, Democracy Now! Co-host Juan Gonzalez was inducted into the Deadline Club's New York Journalism Hall of Fame yesterday at Sardi's in Manhattan. Juan Gonzalez is the first Latino journalist to be selected for the Hall of Fame. He will be inducted along with PBS host Charlie Rose, New York Times journalist Max Frankel, 60 Minutes correspondent Leslie Stahl, ProPublica founder Paul Steiger, and Time magazine journalist and editor Richard Stolley. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Juan Gonzalez. Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
And Juan, congratulations.
Oh,
it was
thank you.
really,
Thank
and
you.
next week we're going to play your speech, your acceptance speech, which was so deeply moving.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And all the Democracy Now! Crew that was there as well. Well, a hostage crisis is underway in Mali where suspected Islamist militants have stormed a luxury hotel in the capital, Bamako. The gunmen opened a fire while taking over 180 people hostage. At least 3 deaths have been confirmed so far. Malian special forces have launched a rescue operation and have exchanged fire with the militants inside. Dozens of people have reportedly been freed so far as Malian commandos go door to door. There are reports the captors have released those hostages who are Muslim while keeping those who are not.
Mali has faced a radical insurgency for over 3 years. Islamist militants seized northern Mali in 2012. A French-led intervention ousted them the following year, but violence continues across the country. For context on this hostage crisis in Mali, though we don't know a lot of details, last week we spoke to Nick Turse, who's the author of the book Tomorrow's Battlefield, U.S. Proxy Wars and Secret Ops in Africa. Turse focuses on the expanding American battlefield in Africa, where he says the U.S. military is now involved in more than 90% of Africa's 54 nations. In a recent interview with Democracy Now!, he discussed how the U.S.-backed intervention in Libya helped fuel the ongoing militant violence in nearby Mali.
One example is the case of Mali, where you had a U.S.-trained officer who overthrew the democratically elected government there just 2 years ago. This was Mali was supposed to be a bulwark against terrorism. It was supposed to be a stable success story. Instead, you have that occurrence. Then last year, a U.S.-trained officer overthrew the government of Burkina Faso. This is, I think it's troubling, and you hear the talk about professionalism of the military and that they're instilling values, human rights, these sorts of things, but in reality what we're seeing on the continent is very different. And if you look at the groups that we're training on the continent, the militaries we're training, and then you compare them to the State Department's own lists of militaries that are carrying out human rights abuses, that are acting in undemocratic ways, you see that these are the same forces. The U.S. is linked up with forces that are generally seen as repressive, even by our own government.
What is the U.S. interest in Africa?
Well, it's difficult to say for sure. I think that the U.S. has viewed Africa as a place of weak governance, sort of a zone that's prone to terrorism, and that there could be a spread of terror groups on the continent if the U.S. doesn't intervene. There's generally only one tool in the U.S. toolkit, and that's a hammer. And unfortunately, then everywhere they see nails.
What were you most surprised by in the drone papers that you got a hold of, kind of what's been described as perhaps a second Edward Snowden, this project of the Intercept that you wrote about, particularly when it came to Africa?
Well, I think it's really just how far the proliferation of drone bases has spread on the continent. I've been looking at this for years, but the drone papers drove home to me just how integral drones have become to the U.S. way of warfare on the continent. I think this feeds into President Obama's strategy, trying to get away from large footprint interventions, the disasters that we've seen in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's leaned heavily now on special operations forces and on drones. And so I think that's probably the most surprising aspect.
And in terms of the reports that we get here, you basically, there's either news about Boko Haram or al-Shabaab or the disintegration, continuing disintegration of Libya. To what extent have these special operations focused on these areas, and to what extent have they had any success?
Well, I think that Libya is actually it's a great example of the best intentions gone awry by the U.S. The U.S. joined a coalition war to oust dictator Muammar Gaddafi, and I think that it was seen as a great success. Gaddafi fell, and it seemed like U.S. policies had played out just as they were drawn up in Washington. Instead, though, we saw that Libya has descended into chaos, and it's been a nightmare for the Libyan people ever since, a complete catastrophe. And it then had a tendency to spread across the continent. Gaddafi had Tuaregs from Mali who worked for him. They were elite troops. As his regime was falling, the Tuaregs raided his weapons stores, and they moved into Mali, into their traditional homeland, to carve out their own nation there. When they did that, the U.S.-backed military in Mali that we'd been training for years began to disintegrate. That's when the U.S.-trained officer decided that he could do a better job, overthrew the democratically elected government. But he proved no better at fighting the Tuaregs than the government he overthrew. As a result, Islamist rebels came in and pushed out his forces and the Tuaregs, and were making great gains in the country, looked poised to take it over. The U.S. decided to intervene again. Another military intervention. We backed the French and an African force to go in and stop the Islamists. We were able to, with these proxies, which is the preferred method of warfare on the African continent, arrest the Islamists' advance. But now Mali's descended into a low-level insurgency, and it's been like this for several years now. The weapons that the Tuaregs originally had were taken by the Islamists and have now spread across the continent. You can find those weapons in the hands of Boko Haram now, even as far away as Sinai in Egypt. So, the U.S. has seen this as a way to stop the spread of militancy, but I think when you look, you see it just as spread it.
That was Nick Turse, author of Tomorrow's Battlefield, U.S. Proxy Wars and Secret Ops in Africa. Again, we spoke to him last week before the latest developments today in Bamako, Mali. The latest details: a hostage crisis is underway where suspected Islamist militants have stormed the Radisson Hotel. The gunmen opened fire while taking about 180 people hostage. At least 3 deaths have been confirmed so far. Malian special forces have launched a rescue operation and have exchanged fire with the militants inside. Dozens of people have reportedly been freed so far as Malian commandos go door to door. We'll bring you more through the weekend. Check our website at democracynow.org. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, a Democracy Now! Exclusive. Please stay with us. Badenya by Mali singer Sakuba Bambino. He was one of the hostages, but we believe he has been released. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, since the Paris attacks 1 week ago, France has escalated bombings of Syria, and the U.S. has vowed an intensification of its war on the Islamic State. With only a small number of U.S. special forces on the ground, Iraq and Syria have become new fronts in a global drone war that has launched thousands of strikes in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, and Somalia. But now an unprecedented group is calling for the drone war to stop. In an open letter to President Obama, 4 U.S. Air Force service members who took part in the drone campaign say targeted killings and remote control bombings fuel the very terrorism the government says it's trying to destroy. The 4 whistleblowers write, quote, "We came to the realization that the innocent civilians we were killing only fueled the feelings of hatred that ignited terrorism and groups like ISIS, while also serving as a fundamental recruitment tool similar to Guantanamo Bay. This administration and its predecessors have built a drone program that is one of the most devastating driving forces for terrorism and destabilization around the world." They continue saying, quote, "We witnessed gross waste, mismanagement, abuses of power, and our country's leaders lying publicly about the effectiveness of the drone program. We cannot sit silently by and witness tragedies like the attacks in Paris, knowing the devastating effects the drone program has overseas and at home."
On top of the toll on civilian victims, the letter also addresses the personal impact of waging remote war. All 4 say they have suffered PTSD and feel abandoned by the military they served, with some now homeless or barely getting by. The letter brings together the largest group of whistleblowers in drone war's history. 3 of the signatories operated the visual sensors that guide U.S. Predator drone missiles to their targets. 2 are speaking out for the first time. 3 in a TV broadcast. They've never done it before. The other 2 have previously raised their concerns about the drone program, including in the documentary Drone. The film, premiering in New York City and Toronto today, reveals how a regular U.S. Air Force unit based in the Nevada desert is responsible for flying the CIA's drone strike program in Pakistan.
We're the ultimate voyeurs, the ultimate peeping Toms. I'm watching this person, and this person has no clue what's going on. No one's going to catch us, and we're getting orders to take these people's lives.
You never know who you're killing because you never actually see a face. You just have silhouette. They don't have to take the shot. They don't have to bear that burden. I'm the one that has to bear that burden.
There's always been a connection between the world of war and the world of entertainment. The military has invested in creating video games that they're using as recruiting tools.
War is an unbelievably profitable business.
The drones have been terrifically effective. They've taken out a lot of the al-Qaeda leadership. It's cheap. It doesn't involve putting troops on the ground.
I believe the United States of America must remain a standard bearer in the conduct of war. That is what makes us different from those whom we fight.
The United States is violating one of the most fundamental rights of all, the right to life.
There's a large number of innocent civilians who are being killed, and that has to be reported.
The majority of the secret drone strikes that have taken place we have always understood, been carried out by the Central Intelligence Agency.
There is a lie hidden within that truth.
The trailer for the documentary Drone, premiering today in New York City and Toronto. In speaking out together, the 4 former service members risk prosecution under the Espionage Act by an administration that's waged an unprecedented campaign against government whistleblowers. They also set their sights on a cornerstone of President Obama's national security policy, just as it threatens to escalate in the aftermath of the Paris attacks. After being elected to office on a platform of Iraq war opposition and a vow to bring the troops home, President President Obama's quietly expanded the drone war far beyond its size and lethality under President George W. Bush. Today, in this Democracy Now! Exclusive, these 4 war whistleblowers join us in their first extended broadcast interview. We're joined by Brandon Bryant and Michael Haas, who have spoken out to a certain extent before, both former sensor operators for the U.S. Air Force Predator program. Stephen Lewis, a veteran of the U.S. Air Force, is also a former sensor operator for the Air Force Predator program, and this week is speaking out for the first time. Also going public for the first time is Sean Westmoreland, a former Air Force technician who helped build a station in Afghanistan used to relay drone data. But first, I want to turn to Jesselyn Radak, National Security and Human Rights Director at the Government Accountability Project, former ethics advisor to the U.S. Department of Justice. As an attorney, she's representing several former drone operators, including this group of 4 young men who are speaking out today. Jesselyn Radak, how much do they risk in speaking out on Democracy Now! Today?
They're taking an enormous and very brave public risk in speaking out. I have clients in the national security and intelligence communities who've done nothing more than tell the truth about some of America's darkest secrets, like torture and secret surveillance, and now in this case, drones. And those clients, a number of them, have been prosecuted under the Espionage Act. And Edward Snowden, of course, another one, is living in exile. Not because they've done anything wrong or even revealed classified information, which they're not here to do today, but because they have embarrassed the U.S. government. All of these men, a number of them, half of them, have complained internally to no avail. They've gone through internal channels, and we're hoping that today, by going public, that this will have more of an influence in the debate, because somehow there's a complete disconnect between these terrorist attacks in Paris and elsewhere and the fact that the drone program has fueled ISIS and al-Qaeda and a number of terrorist groups, and that really needs to be addressed.
And I'd like to ask Brandon Bryant, we've had you on Democracy Now! A couple of years ago, and these guys here worked with you as well. Can you talk about the decision to come out as a group, how you came to that and why at this particular point?
Well, you know, when I first started talking out about my experiences, it was more to get a bunch of stuff off my chest and to actually try to come clean with what I've done and reveal what exactly is going on. And I'm actually really honored to be with these gentlemen right here, is that I trust them, and this is their decision to come out, and I'm here to support them because I've already been doing this for 3 years, and it's time that we just get a bigger coalition of people together to attack this issue.
Why did you sign this letter, and what are you calling on President Obama to do?
We want the president to have more transparency in this issue, and we want the American people to understand exactly what's being done in their name. And I think that all this fear and hatred that keeps going on and is just out of control, and we need to stop it somewhere.
Michael Haas, I wanted to ask you, in terms of your experience in the drone program and the culture that the military basically allowed to flourish in the drone program. You've talked about how your fellow service members talked about the children that they were targeting as well.
Yes, the term fun-sized terrorist was used to just sort of denote children that we'd see on screen.
What was it?
Fun-sized terrorists.
Fun-sized terrorists?
Yes. Other terms we'd use would be cutting the grass before it grows too long. Just doing whatever you can to try to make it easier to kill whatever's on screen. It's and the culture is that mentality is very much nurtured within the drone community, because every Hellfire shot is sort of lauded and applauded, and you don't really examine who exactly was killed, but just that it was an effective shot and the missile hit its target.
When did you start to have questions?
Shortly after I became an instructor, and I started to see how much the mentality had shifted since I had been in. And the 11th hadn't really changed how they had trained their sensor operators from a basic level standpoint.
The 11th is?
The basic training squadron up at Creech. They train all the sensor operators.
This is at Creech in Nevada.
Yes.
And you were a video game addict as you were growing up. You talk about this whole impact of sort of the video game approach to war.
The thing that makes gamers a prime target for this job field is that ability to just multitask and do a lot of things subconsciously and just sort of out of reflex, and you don't really even have to think about it, which is paramount to doing this job. But a lot of it is getting used to just seeing something on screen, killing it, and then going about your business as though you don't really pay it a second thought. It was just an objective to be completed.
I want to go to a clip from the film Drone of our guest Brandon Bryant talking about his first fatal drone strike.
Didn't really understand what it meant to kill at first. It was horrible. The first time was horrible. The second time was horrible. The third time was numbing. The fourth time was numbing. But of course, the first time sticks with you the longest. So we're looking at this thing, these people, and it was like almost instantaneous that someone was like, confirmed weapons, here's the 9 line, you're cleared hot. And we fire the missile. And the safety observer's counting down. He counts down to 0. And he says, splash! And I watched this man bleed out. The missile had taken off one of his legs right above the knee. And I watched him bleed out of his femoral artery. And he's rolling on the ground. And I imagined his last moments. I didn't know what to feel. I just knew that I had ended something that I had no right to end. But I swore an oath. I did what I was supposed to do. I followed through with it. It was like my image of myself was cracking and breaking apart. And the safety observer laughs and he slaps me on the back and he says, "You should have seen how you jumped when I said splash."
That's Brandon Bryant in the film Drone that's opening tonight in New York and Toronto, and Brandon Bryant is with us now. Do you know who you killed?
No. I killed 13 people with a total of 5 Hellfire missile shots, and only 3 of them were actual combatants.
Who were the others?
We don't know. I don't know. I would like to know.
You testified in the German parliament. And you said also, you've testified before the United Nations?
Correct.
That you don't know if you might be picked up for war crimes, but you're willing to risk this now.
Correct. I think that it's completely unfair that we helped prosecute German Nazis in World War II who were just following orders, and we can't put ourselves under that same umbrella. We helped create this current system, the international court system, and we are unable to hold ourselves accountable for our own actions. I think that's completely unfair to the rest of the world.
And hours after you testified at the German parliament, military showed up at your family's house in Montana. Could you
Correct.
talk about that?
Yeah, that was the second time that they'd approached me officially, actually. The first time I was in Seattle getting health care at the VA, and they were like, "Mr. Bryant, this is the FBI, you're not in trouble." And then they kept told me that I was on the ISIS kill list and that I should stop my social media and stop bragging on social media, which means that they didn't even read my social media stuff. And then right after I testified in front of the Bundestag, OSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, appeared at my mother's house and told her that she was on this list. And previously, my dog had been attacked twice as well. And I believe that these are intimidation tactics. And, you know, my mother is the strongest person that I've met, and she told me that she believes in what we're doing and that I should continue, and there's no reason that I should not.
Stephen Lewis, I wanted to ask you, you made one kill and then you immediately appealed to your superiors about what you were doing. Could you talk about your experience, who you killed?
It was late 2009, and I was tasked to go support a troop in contact, and that's whenever our troops are taking fire.
And this was in which country?
Oh, it was in Afghanistan. And during the troops in contact, we were told to go to this specific location. It was 4 guys walking down a mountain path, and I didn't see any weapons. I didn't see anything. About 5 minutes goes by, and 2 Hellfires come in, and they kill 3 people, and there was 1 wounded guy left. I was given clearance to, we were given clearance to fire the missile, and that guy he just wasn't there anymore.
You're given clearance to fire at the wounded guy on the ground?
Yes.
Yeah. So what did you do next?
Seriously reevaluated my life. Shortly after that, I ended up writing a very, very convincing letter to my leadership and told them that I didn't belong there. I didn't want to do it anymore, and I wanted out.
And what was their response?
6 months later, I was out of the Air Force.
How were you chosen as a drone operator?
I was chosen basically at random. I went to imagery analysis school, which I wanted to look at satellite photos. That's what I wanted to do. And about halfway through it, they come up and they say, you're going to Las Vegas, you're going to go to sensor operator school, and you're going to do this.
Did they say why?
They don't have to. There's no argument there. It's, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'll do whatever you tell me to.
And now that you're out of the Air Force, how has what you did in the Air Force, being a drone operator, engaging in that kill, affected you?
It makes any kind of relationship difficult. I can't communicate properly with my friends. I have to preface it with, I'm sorry guys, I can't hang out with you tonight. There's too much going on right now. It's in effect killed every single relationship that I've had afterwards. I can't.
What about this issue that you raise in your letter, how the drone program is actually helping to fuel or create more terrorism?
Well, it's been noted in the film Drone that that kids are afraid to go outside and play or go to school during the day whenever the sun is out, whenever the sun is shining, because they're afraid that they're going to get struck by a drone.
Why don't we go to that? Why don't we go to that, a clip from the film. This is from the film Drone, 2012. A 67-year-old Pakistani woman was killed by an alleged U.S. drone while picking okra in a field with her grandchildren. In 2013, we spoke to her grandchildren, Nabila and Zubair, who were then 9 and 13. Both of them were injured in the strike that killed their grandmother. This begins with Zubair.
I had gone to school that day, and when I came back, I had a snack, and I offered my prayers. And my grandma asked me to come outside and help her pick the vegetables.
You were hit by this drone that killed your grandmother?
Yes, I had seen a drone, and 2 missiles hit down where my grandmother was standing in front of me, and she was blown into pieces, and I was injured to my left leg.
And Nabila, you're 9 years old. How have things changed for you since the attack? How's your going out again, out into the fields alone, or do you fear again other possible attacks?
Ever since the strike, I'm just scared. I'm always scared. All of us little kids, we're just scared to go outside.
That's Nabila, and before that, Zubair, her brother, the Raymonds, talking about the drone strike that killed their grandma in Pakistan. They also testified with their dad, who wasn't there when they were picking okra with their grandmother. They testified in the U.S. Congress. Now, that happened in Pakistan. Your target was in Afghanistan.
I don't think a matter of 500 miles makes a difference. The culture is very, very similar. And you're creating an atmosphere of fear. And there's an old saying in Texas, you don't back a scared animal up against a wall. And if you do that, he's going to come out fighting. And that's exactly, I think, what's happening now.
Has the VA provided mental help to you as you suffer?
I've been to the VA, but it seems useless. It seems useless for me. It's been 6 months. They've said, hey, you need an MRI. It's been 6 months without an MRI. It's, hey, you need medication to manage this pain. It's been 6 months without medication to manage pain. It's, if they're not going to take care of you, then why should you even go?
Yeah, Sean, I wanted to ask you, you were a technician in the drone program. Could you talk about what specifically you did and how your duties differed from the operators?
Right. So we built a site that was used as a relay station while we were there.
While you were in Afghanistan?
While I was in Afghanistan, yes, at Kandahar. And we were taking in signals from all over Afghanistan, 250,000 square miles, like, essentially. And we were relaying it and sending it long haul, from there to the Combined Air Operations Center. And
which is located where?
In Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. And then to Ramstein. And pretty much we had been building, the site, and one day my boss came to me and everybody else, and he handed us a headset, and we were listening to airplane talking to, it was an A-10 talking to a battle manager. And he smiled and he said, "We're killing bad guys now, boys." And I think why it was so significant for me was my father was actually working at a headquarters in Kuwait during 9/11, and he was ordering the missile parts for the initial bombing, and he was telling me some of the culture that was there and the people making command decisions. They would go after certain targets, and then they would have missiles left over, and they would find targets, which was essentially anybody who was wearing white. And that was my first thought whenever he said, "We're killing bad guys now, boys."
Explain what you mean by anyone wearing white.
anyone wearing white.
Why white?
Because the stigma that people who wore white were Taliban. So those were the thoughts that were running through my head while I was there. I started having nightmares about what I did hurting children and me trying to help them and not being able to.
What year was this?
It was in 2009. And whenever we got back, we got a piece of paper. It was the enlisted performance report. And it said on it that we had supported 2,400 close air support missions and assisted in 200+ enemy kills, which I knew was wrong, because anybody in the Air Force knows that an airstrike has collateral damage, you know, a significant amount of the time.
So you're saying you knew it was much more?
Well, I'm saying that it wasn't all enemies, it was civilians as well. And when I looked at the UNAMA report that came out the next year, it was saying somewhere upward of 350 civilian kills. So it's kind of, it's made me sort of reevaluate what I was doing there and try and figure out, you know, exactly how, you know, we got that on our piece of paper. And we, well, I guess I come to the conclusion that, you know, these are the people that were actually administering the strikes. And you had pilots that pulled the trigger. You had imagery analysts that picked the targets, and the, you know, the decision maker. And all within the system, it's the responsibility for killing the person is divided, so nobody feels the full responsibility of what they're doing. And I think that we're moving towards a world where, in aerial warfare, where increasingly there's going to be more technicians and less decision makers. And I think we should open up a new paradigm of, you know, ethics and you know, what it means to do your duty as a technician. And I think one of the more influential voices for me was Oppenheimer,
J. Robert Oppenheimer.
J. Robert Oppenheimer, yeah, exactly. Who developed the atomic bomb. And I mean, to see the effects of that must have been devastating. He must have felt like a destroyer of worlds, and I think for me that's kind of how I feel, because all the signals were coming through there, and everybody who was making that system work was responsible. And I think how this applies to Germany is that the air base in Ramstein housing that data relay station, the people there are responsible for whatever signals that are going through there, and the German government not communicating to the public or not knowing what we were doing. It was a big disrespect on America's part and potentially the German government's part. I'm not saying that they knew.
I wanted to ask you...
we have to break, but then we're going to come back to your question one. J. Robert Oppenheimer's quote, I think he was quoting the Bhagavad Gita, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. J. Robert Oppenheimer, he was the leading scientist that created the atomic bomb in New Mexico. And you live in New Mexico, right, Sean?
Yes.
Sean Westmoreland, Stephen Lewis, Brandon Bryant, and Michael Haas. 4 young men who are speaking out, between them more than 20 years of experience operating military drones. They've all written a letter to President Obama. We urge you to stay with us as we continue this discussion. Back in a minute.
Something's burning, something's burning, not far away, not far away, not far away. Something's turning, something's turning, closer each day. Do you see a silhouette, something overhead? Drones bearing down, now innocence is dead. Someone's crying, someone's crying. Not far away, not far away, not far away. Someone's lying. Hear what I say. Drones are sweeping, politicians scream. Got your dirty secret hidden deep within. Something's burning, something's burning.
Drones, Something's Burning by Jimmy, here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
I want to turn to a clip from the film Drone about the connection between video games and military recruitment. This clip features Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Brian Callahan and former U.S. Navy pilot Missy Cummings. But first, P.W. Singer, author of Wired for War.
There's always been a connection between the world of war and the world of entertainment. And I call this phenomena militainment, where the military world is actually now pulling tools from the world of entertainment to do its job better. The military has invested in creating video games that they're using as recruiting tools.
How do we find our 18X pilots? There's been a lot of different theories. If you can answer that question or I can answer that question, you can make a lot of money for the Air Force right now because we don't know. We're trying to get our arms around what really does make the best candidate for unmanned airplanes and how do we identify these people early.
Video gamers do have a skill set that is very important and actually enhances the skill set of drone operators. So when I talk to people about this, I say, we don't need Top Gun pilots anymore. We need Revenge of the Nerds.
We're also joined by Tonya Hession-Shea, the director of the film of Drone. Tonya, welcome to Democracy Now! Could you talk about this whole issue of the recruitment of gamers by the military?
Yeah, I mean, the gamers have been incredibly important for the U.S. military, and they have been targeting gamers in their recruiting strategies for the last decade. And this has been very successful, and it is now also spreading around the world. It is done in Germany and in Sweden and also in Norway. You know, gamers, their brains are pretty much wired to handle the challenges of modern warfare. And you know, their eye-thumb coordination, their multitasking, their team fighting, the target shooting, they are basically perfect for the drone war. And the relationship between the military and the entertainment industry, I think it's very, very important to, you know, take a close look at here. Our children are basically growing up playing real war scenarios from a very young age. And this gamified, you know, strange perception of war has a big impact on them. To them, war is made to look fun, killing is made to look cool, and it really shapes them. And I think this militainment has a huge cost. And working with the drone operators too, just seeing, you know, how the gaming attitude maybe is, you know, bleeding into how the drone program is operating has been very disturbing to me.
And of course, you guys know in your own experience that you're involved in a war where you never actually meet or see the people you're killing. You have no direct relationship, no real relationship to the war that you're actually playing such a critical role in. I'm wondering what your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that one of the big things that we should address is, like, there's a lot of gamers that have been offended by stuff that we've talked about, and there's a lot of gamers that are offended by, you know, talking about the correlation between violence and video games, and there's a lot of studies that are out there that say that only certain video games cause certain aspects of this violence. And you know, I'm an avid gamer, or I was at least. I'm trying to get back into it, and I love this medium. It's just, the drone program destroyed my love of this medium as well. And I think gamers should be offended that the military and the government are using this type of thing to manipulate and recruit these guys. It's a blatant misuse of power, abuse of power. It shouldn't be something along the lines of, like, yeah, I want to play this game with my friends, or even people that you don't see them face to face. You meet a lot of people instantaneously all over the world. We're so interconnected. We're more interconnected now than we've ever been in the entirety of human history. And that's being exploited to help people kill one another.
And Michael Haas, as we wrap up, what you want people to be left with today, and there's a large military audience here too, what you have to say to your fellow servicemen and women.
On the other side of that screen, they're very real. It feels like a video game and it looks like a video game, but it's very, very real. And to keep that in mind and not become disconnected from your own humanity and not to take away theirs, that's what I'd want to leave them with.
Sean Westmoreland.
We should all take responsibility for what we do at all times. I have a cell phone in my pocket. It has metals in there that were extracted from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where there's been a war for 15 years and 4 million, I think 4.4 million people have died. I know that, and that bothers me.
You've all left the military. Did they request you re-enlist?
Yeah.
Were you offered a bonus to re-enlist?
We all were.
How much?
50,000.
How much, Mike?
80,000.
Stephen?
Over 100,000.
109,000, plus a step promotion and safety evaluation upgrader.
What did you say?
I said, F that, I'm getting out.
Stephen?
I'm done.
Michael?
I made my decision to get out long before that re-enlistment became even an option.
Sean?
I burned my uniform at my boss's grill and I hitchhiked around the world.
But for so many young people, that's a lot of money, and they're tempted, I guess, and they're going to keep increasing the bonuses, obviously, as the situation in the war on terror continues. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you all for being with us. Very important what you had to say today. Brandon Bryant, Sean Westmoreland, Stephen Lewis, and Michael Haas. Thank you so much. Tanya Messenche, director of the film Drone as well, and Jesselyn Radak with the Whistleblower and Source Protection Program known as Whisper at Expose Facts. And that does it for our show. An update right now on what's happening in Mali as we speak. The ongoing hostage situation in Bamako, the capital. The U.S. military says U.S. Special Operation troops are working with Malian Special Operation forces to free the more than 140 hostages still inside the Radisson Blu Hotel right there in Bamako, which was seized by suspected Islamist gunmen this morning. And that does it for our broadcast. For the whole show today, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. The video is there, the audio is there, the podcast, and the transcript of our broadcast. We are hiring a director of development to lead our fundraising efforts. You can find out more at democracynow.org. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Carla Wills, Laura Gottesdiener, Dina Guzder, Amy Littlefield, Nermeen Sheikh, Sam Alcoff, Robbie Karen, Steve Martinez, Hani Massoud, Juan Carlos Davila, Pedro Rodriguez. Mike DeFilippo and Miguel Noguera are engineers. Special thanks to Becca Staley, Julie Crosby, Hugh Grand, David Prude, Ariel Boone, and Vesta Godars. And to our camera crew, John Randolph, Karen Kirk-Meadows, Charina Nadura. Our website is democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Thanks so much for joining us.